What's up, Pescados? We're going to do a quick lesson on food chains and food webs as we are exploring life science. So let's get right into it. Food chains follow just one path as animals find food. For instance, this is a food chain from the sun, giving energy to the grass, giving energy to the grasshopper, giving energy to the mouse, giving energy to the owl. And a food web shows how plants and animals are connected in many ways to help them all survive. You can still find the same food chain in this example here. Here's our sun giving energy to the grass, to the grasshopper, and the grasshopper to the mouse, and the mouse to the owl. But there are other things that eat the grass and other things that eat the grasshopper in this food web. So let's just jump right on in and talk about these kinds of animals and all that good stuff. All right, the sun. The sun's light powers food chains and food webs. It provides energy for producers to make their own food. So everything starts with the sun. And let's move on to producers so we can see that. Producers take the sun's light and convert it into food through photosynthesis. This group makes up the largest group of organisms on Earth. Producers include plants and algae. We have things like grass, algae, trees, and bushes. And the one you might be less familiar with is algae, and this is just algae on some rocks. One time you see algae is if you've ever seen a fish tank that the glass starts to turn a little green, that's algae. Still, it's just something that produces its own food, and it's a producer. All right, so let's move on. Consumers. Consumers cannot produce their own food, so they must eat other organisms. Consumers eat producers and or other consumers. Herbivores are plant eaters. Carnivores are meat eaters. And omnivores are plant and meat eaters. Like this deer is an herbivore, a coyote is a carnivore, and a rocket raccoon is a guardian of the galaxy. What? Oh, sorry. I don't know how that got in there. A raccoon is an omnivore, and you are an omnivore. Decomposers. Decomposers form the final link in the food chain. They break down dead animals and plants and return vital nutrients to the soil. Vital means important. Worms and insects and larvae are kinds of decomposers, like this. Maggots are baby flies. Fungi, like mushrooms, are decomposers, but many decomposers are microscopic bacteria, and you have to see them with a microscope. And that's a picture of what that could look like. Let's check out our food chain, and let's notice our little cloud here says the arrow shows the transfer of energy. So, for instance, the sun transfers energy to plants and algae. So the sun transfers energy to the grass, and the grass makes its own food. And then a deer comes along and eats some of the grass and gives energy to the deer. And then a coyote might come along and eat Mr. Deer here and give energy to the coyote. And when all three of these things die, they give energy to decomposers, and the whole circle of life starts over again. Cue the music for Lion King. All right. Here's a food web. A food web shows how plants and animals are connected in many ways to help them survive. If a consumer only has one food source, they will not survive if that food source disappears. Find individual food chains inside the food web. And over here we have the energy arrow, and I made these really skinny, but you can find individual food chains inside of this food web. So we have the sun giving energy to the grass giving energy to the rabbit, and when Mr. Hawk flies by, giving energy to Mr. Hawk when he eats Mr. Rabbit. And when all three of these things die, grass, rabbit, and hawk, they give energy to the decomposers, and the whole circle of life starts over again with the soil getting the nutrients. In closing, Food chains follow just one path as animals find foods. Food webs show how plants and animals are connected in many ways to help them survive. It's multiple food chains. The sun transfers energy to food chains and webs. Producers, plants and algae, use energy from the sun to make their own food with photosynthesis. Consumers eat producers and or other consumers for energy. Herbivores eat plants. Carnivores eat meat. Omnivores eat plants and meat. And one that you might see out there is an insectivore, which would fall under carnivore, and it's something that eats just insects. And then decomposers break down dead organic matter and return vital nutrients to the soil, meaning important nutrients to the soil. So that is our lesson on food chains and food webs. And remember, the most important thing, tiburones eat pescados. Oh yeah, yes they do.